Hey there, and welcome to week 7. We are continuing our discussion this week on the correction system. One of the things that I will continue to remind you of is the fact that there are three prongs in the criminal justice system, and corrections is just one of them. Policing being probably the most famous, as we've said before, and then courts. So three prongs of the criminal justice system: courts, corrections, and policing. If you get nothing else out of this course, hopefully that'll be driven into your mind and you remember that. But the idea of corrections is the idea of punishing the public. And if we're going to punish offenders, not everybody in public, but if we're going to punish offenders, we need to understand as a society and as individuals why we do that. Why do we punish people? I think when we have the idea of corrections, and society looks at the idea of corrections, and when I say society, maybe the layman's society, the folks that aren't necessarily in this career field or in this that live in the criminal justice world, and we think about jail or prisons as we talked about last week. Why we put people in jail? Because they broke the law. You break the law, you go to jail. Why? Because you broke the law. Well, what's the point of going to jail? What does that do other than the fact that they're just those two ideas are married? You break the law, you go to jail. Well, we need to look at that. There's several reasons why, and you guys did a good job discussing a lot of that last week, and I just want to review that a bit. So the theories of punishment, they're actually individualized. There's some overlap, but they are individualized. And one of the most common reasons that folks talk about is deterrence. And let's talk about deterrence. Let's talk about what that actually means. Bentham and Beccaria were two philosophers way back in the 1700s, and they had the idea that they wanted to make sure that people could change their behavior if we gave people negative reinforcement, punishment. And so they said that if you punish somebody and that punishment is swift, severe, and certain, then they're going to do a cost benefit analysis, what they called a hedonistic calculus. And they're going to weigh out their options, think, well, I don't want to be punished, but I do want to do this thing. It would be fun to break the law. But you know what? I'm going to weigh it out. And, being punished is worse than the pleasure I get from breaking the law. So I'm just not going to break the law. And that's what they said would happen. People in general seek pleasure and avoid pain. That's that's the idea of human nature. So if people will seek pleasure and avoid pain, if we give them enough pain, i.e., punishment, then we won't have to worry about them wanting to break the law anymore. Well, let's talk about different kinds of deterrence and how we deter. I'll give the example. I think punishment in general, corrections in general, can be used. It could be analogous uh, to when we discipline children. So imagine a parent with two children, an older child, and an older son and a younger daughter. Just for simplicity's sake, an older son and a younger daughter. And that older son is starting to get into his feelings, and he decides, you know what I'd like to do? I think I'd like to smart off to mom. I think I'd like to call mom out of her name. And so he decides to get big and brave. And next time mom tells him to go clean his room, he cusses her out and calls her out of her name. In most households, that's not going to go over very well. And in many households, regardless of how you personally feel about corporal punishment, many households, that son is going to get a smack or a spanking. So let's talk about why. Why is that son getting a smack or a spanking? Outside of the idea of it's pure anger, we're going to set that aside. But if it's truly to punish the older son for what he did, what does that do? Logistically, the smack and the spanking, or the spanking, they hurt. There's pain. Hopefully, the idea that exchange of it really felt good to smart off to mom, but it really hurt to get that smack or that spanking. And on top of that, I said there's an older son and a younger daughter. If he gets that smack in front of his sibling, it could be a little embarrassing. And there's emotional pain involved. So now you've got the weight of the emotional pain and the physical pain, hopefully outweighing the desire to smart off to mom and call her out of her name. We're gonna call that specific deterrence. He did it, something bad happened. Next time when he wants to do it again, he's gonna weigh those options, cost benefit, hedonistic calculus. He has free will. He can do it if he wants, but he's going to weigh his options in general in the theory of deterrence. And the pain associated with that decision is going to hopefully be a specific deterrent from him doing it again. Now, What about the younger daughter that saw this happen? She never smarted off to mom. She never got smacked. She never got spanked. But next time, when she gets into some of her feelings and she decides, I sure would like to smart off to mom and call her out of her name. If she remembers back what happened to her older brother, and she thinks, well, I don't want that to happen to me, and she decides not to do it, that is a perfect example of general deterrence. She never had to be punished in order to learn her lesson. In this case, she learned from somebody else's mistakes. So that's going to be general deterrence, specific deterrence, and general deterrence. So deterrence is going to be one reason why we put people in jail. You have somebody who robs Casey's, they go to jail for it when they get caught, and they think next time they want to rob Casey's, well, I just don't want to go to jail again. A lot of bad stuff happened when I went to jail. I couldn't have my freedom. I couldn't see my family. I lost my job, things like that. It just, it wasn't pleasant. So hopefully that weighs into their decision next time. They think, okay, well, next time I don't want to rob Casey's, and they just don't do it. Specific deterrence. Now, another reason that we punish folks is for rehabilitation. We want them to be able to make better decisions in the future. Those better decisions can come from the fact of what we think of rehabilitation in general society, like narcotics and alcohol rehabilitation. Maybe people are making bad decisions because they're addicted to substances and they're dependent on these substances, and so they're robbing Casey's to fund their addiction. So if we punish them by incarcerating them, sending them to the correction system, and get them to mandated rehabilitation for those addictions, those dependencies, maybe they'll make better decisions in the future. Or maybe they're breaking the law because they don't have job skills. So maybe we can get them some job skills while they're incarcerated. Or maybe we can get them a high school diploma or even a college degree while they're incarcerated. This is going to rehabilitate them and give them tools to make better decisions in the future. That's what rehabilitation looks like. Sometimes, I talked about the son getting smacked or spanked, and I said, well, hopefully it's not out of anger. Sometimes punishment is out of anger. Sometimes the public says that bad people deserve bad things. It's their just desserts. They deserve it. You break the law, you deserve for something bad to happen to you. We're going to call that retribution. Now, there's a thin line between retribution and vengeance, and that thin line is who's pushing for that retribution. If an individual is pushing for that retribution, that bad thing, then we're going to call that vengeance. If society at large is pushing for bad things to happen to bad people, we call that retribution. So thin line, but slightly different. And the last one I want to talk about is the idea that maybe as a society or an individual, we just don't care about the pain pleasure principle. We don't care if they do a hedonistic calculus later. If they rob Casey's, we don't care if this prison wasn't fun and later they make they do that cost benefit analysis, and we don't care if they make better decisions later. And honestly, we don't really care if bad people get bad things. All we care about is that we want to be in a society that's free of crime. I deserve to live in a place where Casey's doesn't get robbed. And you know what? If somebody robs Casey's and we put them in prison, they can't rob Casey's. Every day they're in prison is another day they can't rob Casey's. We're going to call that incapacitation. No thought as to what's going to happen when they get out. Just the fact that every day they're in, they can't break the law, or at least any laws that they do break while they're in don't affect me. That's the theory of incapacitation. So we talked about deterrence, specific and general, rehabilitation, retribution, and incapacitation. So with that in mind, I look forward to reading your assignments this week, and we will talk again soon.